All right, guys, now we're going to move on to another industry vertical, retail. And obviously, retail has been one of those which has been most hit by the pandemic. But also, as Srini showed us in his keynote earlier, there's been some of the most exciting innovation coming out of this space. So let's hear it from someone who lives and breathes retail. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Ian Cruddas, who's head of retail at PETRONAS. And to moderate the session is Adrian Tan, who's our head of retail from our business insights team at ADA. Over to you, Adrian.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are okay wherever you are, 2 hours behind, 3 hours behind, or somewhere in Poland or in Europe. So welcome to today's session on the digitalization of retail. My name is Adrian, and I'm the head of the retail sector here at ADA within the Business Insights Group, which are generally known as the geeks and the nerds within the organization. So just for some general housekeeping rules, if you do have any questions, please do shoot it down below at the Q&A tab. And Ian and I will definitely attend to it if time permits. So the man I have the pleasure of introducing today, I met a year ago at a retail conference here in KL. And his speech was such an eye-opener and inspiration for me that I still use one of his sentences till today. And the sentence was, "It's not an unknown fact that retailers spend 95% of their time executing and 5% in strategy, whereas for corporates, sometimes the reverse of that." So it is with great pleasure I welcome a friend of mine and inspiration, Mr. Ian Cruddas. He's the head of retail for non-fuel at PETRONAS. And I think just a brief introduction of Ian, he has a few decades of experience in the retail sector, including very senior leadership roles in fashion, convenience, pharmacies, hypermarts, even grilled Portuguese chicken. And now at PETRONAS, leading the way for non-fuel related purchases, like Mesra stores, if you guys are familiar with. So just to start off the day and to set the tone, though a very grim tone, and also just a recap to a session I did last week on changing consumer behaviors pre and post-COVID, we had a hypothesis. And that hypothesis is about how no one is actually leading the front or having the upper hand, as some may say. And in this chart that you see in your screen now, using exact data and some of our dashboards that we have, and also specifically because Ian comes from a business of petrol, kiosks, gas stations, and convenience store, there is an overall general decrease in footfall in these retail outlets. And I guess we'd like to hear from Ian. What has been the impact on this pandemic on retailers like the Mesra stores, who are generally conceived as more traditional retail?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sitting here in wonderful Malaysia. Sadly, we're in a controlled lockdown phase again, so we're all working from home, and I hope it's better around the rest of the world. When the COVID impacted Malaysia, which it did in the latter part of March this year, with a full lockdown across all businesses, its initial impact on particularly the fuel business was immense, and fuel dropped to sort of 95–99% from what it was before, as people couldn't travel, move around, use their cars. And at the same time, the C-store business under the Mesra brand also plunged to about 90% of what it was before. What we saw post-COVID, and as we came through the restrictions that the government imposed on individuals and on businesses, is a far quicker rebound on the C-store than we did on fuel. So fuel took a little bit longer to rebound. The C-store took around 5 weeks from lockdown to be fully back to, and in fact, in excess of what it was tracking before COVID. We think that might have been partly due to the panic buying at the supermarkets and the hypermarkets. And as they ran out of stock, as their availability diminished, we benefited by picking up sales from that as we started to open our stores. But we had a much more of a V-shaped rebound as opposed to a U, which is what we were anticipating.
Thanks, Ian. And what did you exactly do differently, though, like for something like this?
Well, I mean, look, we I think all retailers and all businesses all got caught out by this. This is not something you could plan for. This was not something that was expected. And certainly for the first couple of days, weeks, we were scrabbling around. We are disadvantaged by our supply chain, but we are advantaged by our distribution with over 1,000 locations across Peninsula and East Malaysia. But our logistics and our supply chain is not secure. We're dependent on 500 distributors. Their movement was restricted. So trying to get stock into the store was our key priority, just trying to get stock into the store. We increased our range. We started to carry ranges of products that were beyond our normal footfall. So some of the key essentials like rice, bread, oil, some items that we wouldn't normally carry, and we were able to get those into the store. And then, of course, because we're a C-store and because a large proportion of our shopping is still cigarettes, unfortunately, for those of you who are smokers, we were able to be a destination for cigarettes, although they were actually viewed as a non-essential product, which is, I'm sure, contrary to what most smokers would assume. But we regrouped and we got ourselves back on track. And I think one of the positives, if there was any positives out of COVID, was that what COVID has done to our business is it's forced us to review and accelerate our digital, online and delivery plans, which were already in place, but this has actually kickstarted us into accelerating them.
So I guess in line of that, what would your advice be for retailers, for example, to kind of look at 2021 and beyond? I mean, looking at you, I guess, getting your ship in order before sailing, and I think 80 or 90% of retailers out there are probably on the same boat as you are.
Yeah, I mean, well, having listened to the young fella before who may or may not be a millennial talking about millennials, my advice to a millennial is don't become a retailer. I've done this for many, many years. And of course, for a number of those years, there's always been this move away from bricks and mortar retail. There's always been this move around how do we do online? How do we do digital? How do we use the consumer's data? And we're not short of data. We've got data coming out of our ears. But as in most retailers' examples, we don't genuinely know how to use this data. And as you said in the quote that you've used from me, we are 95% action orientated, and a lot of it is still in the bricks and mortar retail world, particularly in the developing markets, is still very much instinct. I think what retailers need to do now going forward is, this is a worst case scenario, or one of the worst case scenarios. And we need to, as retailers, think about how our consumers' needs are changing, and they're changing faster than they've ever changed before. Consumers are being quicker to take on new ideas. They're more prepared to try new things. They're more prepared to try different formats, different brands. I think brand loyalty has diminished, and everything is speeding up. And I think COVID has now sped that up even further. And as retailers, I think we've just got to be far, far more agile and responding to the consumer and listening to what the consumer wants and understanding what the consumer wants. Now, we all know that most consumers, a lot of the time, don't always really know what they want, but we've just got to be far more adaptable and talking to the consumers, looking at data, responding to those needs. And unfortunately, a lot of bricks and mortar retailers, and we're one of them, are sort of, locked down by the fact that we've got these physical outlets. And how do we maximize that outlet space? How do we maximize that land bank that we're advantaged with? And how we can then pivot our business and our industry into retail beyond 2021.
Awesome. And I think it kind of brings us to our next discussion on consumers. Looking at the chart now, are also willing to try new things. And I think we agree with the general population now being less loyal or to a specific brand. I guess in some sense it kind of leads into like, how can a traditional business like PETRONAS meet demands of a digital first consumer? I think Also, leading on to some of the questions that are being asked, like, is e-commerce something you like to get into, or how does one kind of approach that subject?
Look, it's a thorny question, and one that all retailers have to adjust their thinking. You know, C-stores, how do we maximize those C-store spaces, and how do we maximize our forecourt and our land banks that we have as a Petromart? I'm sure my household is not dissimilar to many households. You know, the amount of home deliveries and parcels on random packages that get delivered to my house now versus 3 years ago is significantly increased. Yeah, every other day there's a random package being handed in. I'm not sure who's buying it, whether it's the children or the wife, but we're not unusual. And I think, you know, there's a far greater willingness for people to order food to eat online and have it delivered to their house. And I think someone like a PETRONAS, the challenge to us and our business is a lot of our products are fairly generic. And what this has forced us to do is, well, let's look at what our product portfolio is, because I'm allowed to mention brands, I guess, but, you know, things like Coke, Pringles, Pepsi are generic. You can buy them pretty much anywhere. And you can also buy them cheaper at certain times when they're being promoted in hypermarkets and supermarkets. So what's our compelling USP for a customer to order from us online and have delivered to their home? So what it's forced us to do is say, well, look, our basket of goods isn't right for that consumer. And what it does is we've got to change and pivot our business model so that if we are going to have an online presence, that we have a unique set of products that are uniquely Mesra. You can only buy them from Mesra. And maybe that is own label products from the white goods type realm of tissue paper that's better value than maybe a supermarket, but then also to the ready to eat, ready to cook, ready to drink segment, bakery, branded as Macan at Mesra, which is a brand we launched a couple of weeks ago, and we now have in a dozen stores around our business. And it's those things that will enable us to have an online platform. At the moment, we've attempted and tried sort of an online, a Mesra online. The demand is negligible because, as I say, our product is not differentiated enough, and you can buy it cheaper and in greater volumes from other retailers. But what we did see is that the online basket is significantly larger than the in-store basket. So again, there's clearly an appetite. People do want stuff delivered to their houses. I think also from a Petromart, we need to look at ourselves as a more of a food-based operator, so that as people are driving home from work, once we're able to drive home from work, we can pick up a meal on the way home because we're all busy, we're all rushed. And we've just got to move our model. The reliance on cigarettes and CSD isn't going to take us through that, or salty snacks is not going to take us beyond 2021 in reality.
Thanks, Ian. And I think earlier on there was a discussion on Settle. I think there was a question that was posed of a person who used to use Shell and with the alliances with Bonus Link and all, and somehow the move to go digital, or from the e-wallets platform to Settle, to kind of bring that stickiness in. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what have you guys been doing differently, I guess, in using those platforms and kind of moving them into the likes of Mesra?
Well, I mean, Settle, for those of you who don't know, Settle is a fantastic piece of application technology that actually sits outside of the Mesra business. Is actually a separate business under the overarching PETRONAS company. And Settle was essentially designed as a pay for fuel application. And what Settle enables the consumer to do is it enables them to top up their wallet. It enables them to drive to a petrol station. It enables the consumer to be able to unlock the pump, fill and pay for their fuel in a very seamless transaction. The thing that I struggle for as the guy who's responsible for the Mesra stores is Settle gives the consumer another reason not to go into the shop, because you don't have to go in and pay. So we did have some internal conflicts around, well, you know, what's that benefit to our business? And that's fantastic for the consumer. It's fantastic for the data that we can get about the consumer. But as I say, it does give the consumer another reason not to go into the Mesra store, to go out of beyond the forecourt. So what we've just recently enabled with Settle is now Settle you can use as an e-wallet. At PETRONAS and PDB and Mesra, we haven't accepted any other e-wallets at this stage. So Settle now is an e-wallet, and the consumer can pay for goods in the C-store with Settle. And the other thing we're trialing at the moment in 35 stores is a adaptation of Settle called Settle to Me, where whilst the consumer is using Settle to unlock the pump and fuel the car, prompts will come up in the application. Do you want to buy this? Are you aware of this promotion? And then the consumer, whilst they're sitting in the car, can order and have the goods brought out to the car. So we finally sort of satisfied some of my requests around how does Settle become more retail orientated rather than just fuel orientated. But that's what Settle does. Now, I think the challenge with Settle is we're collecting a huge amount of data. And what we're not really doing as a business is properly using that data to do targeted marketing, to try and make our consumers fuel up more. But as a seamless transaction, it's a phenomenal piece of kit.
Ian, just maybe because we still have some time, maybe we can answer some of the questions on the floor. I guess based on your experience, not only in Mesra but throughout your many years in retail, one of the questions was like the pandemic was unprecedented by many, and I think a lot of the retailers may be at the end of the runway due to sunk costs and whatnot, and on their last dollar. What would be your advice to them in times like these?
Well, if it's a Malaysian retailer, I'd say close down and let me get their market share. But I think a lot of retailers have been severely punished by this because a lot of their investments have all been in bricks and mortar stores, have all been around people coming out and browsing and shopping and window shopping. And I think that's really a struggle for the non-essential products like fashion, health and beauty. I think the supermarkets and hypermarkets are benefiting significantly because more people are cooking and eating in and eating at home. I think the C-stores, whether it's Petromart or standalone C-stores, have benefited in the main because the consumers are doing far smaller baskets and just want that convenience of being local or on the way home. I do think many retailers, as we're already seeing, are struggling and are shutting down many of their outlets and trying to very quickly pivot into an online model. And I think that's the reality for retailers globally. I think Malaysia as a market, which is somewhere that I've worked for 23, 24 years, there is still that love of the shopping malls, but we're seeing already the shopping malls moving far more away from what would be called traditional retail and far more to F&B and going out and socializing. Of course, then you have MCO come in and that impacts that element of it as well. But, I think retailers have taken a hit. And I think, if you look at where I'm from, which is the UK, the high street model in the UK, the traditional high street model in the UK was already falling apart even pre-MCO. And I think this MCO has been like the final nail in the coffin for many of those operators. I think every retailer's got to really look at themselves and start to talk to the consumer. Retailers can be a little bit ignorant or arrogant towards their consumers. I think we have to listen more to what the consumers want. We have to adapt to trends far greater than we have done before. We've got to be more flexible. I think the traditional retail approach of just doing weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly promotional activities, and that's your differential, is not sustainable going forward. And I think retailers need to look at own label, their offer, how they make themselves different from anyone else. Because I think being a generic retailer is not viable as we go through this.
I think we've had several conversations about how we pivot businesses, and I think you mentioned there's quite a lot of land bank that Petronas possesses. And then I guess when you're looking at partnerships and different types of businesses that you can actually integrate into your business as well, maybe you can help us learn a little bit more, like what you guys are doing differently in that space.
Yeah, I mean, again, the advantage we have is that we do have large pieces of land. Yeah, so we're not beholden to the shopping malls. We're not beholden to, the high street model. We've got large pieces of land with petrol. This has enabled us to put on QSR. So we have a large number of partners like the McDonald's, the KFC, the Starbucks of the world. But I think what MCO has done is we've still got these land banks. How do we maximize this land, and how do we create hubs for the consumer? And we will take different approaches in different parts of Malaysia and different types of stores. And there are opportunities in our land banks to maybe put things like maybe hairdressers, maybe dentists, maybe doctors, maybe pharmacies. We've got that space. And maybe I think what will happen is we will move far more towards urban hubs with F&B, with food, and with services that are convenient for the consumer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ian.
No problem.
Any parting words before we end?
No, I'm just keep safe, everybody, yeah, and take care. Yeah, look after your health.
Oh, thank you very much, Ian, for being such a remarkable sport. And have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks. Back to you, Steph.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Ian, Adrian. That was awesome. In my simplistic mind, I always thought of PETRONAS as petrol and petrol stations, but obviously you're a full-blown retailer, and it's so fascinating to hear how PETRONAS is trying to streamline and maximize both their physical and their online presence. And there's so much to learn from them in this space. Okay, thanks, guys. We're about to hit to a short break, but before that, I just have one more poll for you guys. So stick around to take this poll. Let me launch it. I hope you can see this. What's the biggest benefit you expect to gain from digital transformation, given that we've talked so much about it today? All right, let's see what everyone says. Yeah, so the majority of you are expecting to gain from hyper-personalized customer experience. And I think we see a common thread, right? And this keeps coming up throughout the sessions earlier today, and something you guys are all expecting to as well. We know that the customer really is in the driver's seat, and they have higher and higher expectations of businesses to understand them and personalize their experiences. So it's no wonder that all of you picked this.